Welcome to What the Frack.
We are your fractional team, and today we break down marketing trends, strategies, and tactics
in 30 minutes or less
so that you can do the fun stuff like be creative.
Hi, Tamara.
Nicole, what's happening?
We're back again. You know, I feel like more and more I'm seeing and hearing from clients that they want to just jump onto all the trends, right? Like, I don't know if you've been on social media lately or YouTube. Every video is this like scare tactic that you need to be on this next big trend. And as technology is going faster and faster, the trends are coming faster and faster. How do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah. No, it's definitely a scare. Like if you're not using this tool, you're missing out on millions of dollars or the perfect acquisition tool. Like I think all of it is such hype and not a lot of backing up of it. So it's interesting. It's hard, but you know what? I fall prey to it. It's hard not to think, what if I am missing that one like diamond in the rough, right?
Yeah. And it's hard for especially businesses who don't have $1 million marketing budgets or, they have small teams to keep on track of it. And the thing I always talk about is how Foundation allows you the opportunity to jump on some of these trends and utilize them. And I think our guest today, I'm really excited to talk to him and get his viewpoint on it because I think he might be on the same page as us. So I'm going to introduce Jeff here. So Jeff has built Jeff Maines, if you want to follow along, he's built 5 companies, exited 4. He's scaled to over 260 million plus and has weathered both the calm seas and the crashing waves. And Tamara, I love a good pun. Anyone who's worked with Clever Cow has seen all of our puns. And Jeff is you'll see in this bio, we have some good puns here. So as CEO of the Champion Leadership Group, he coaches founders and executives from 2 million to 100 million plus using the proven executive navigation system. He's also the best-selling author of Small Fish, Big Pond and The Captain's Keys, host of the top-rated SaaS Fuel podcast, and an ocean explorer at heart, in case you haven't gotten those puns. Whether underwater or in the boardroom, Jeff's mission is clear: to help bold leaders scale smarter and support, not stress. So are you ready to meet Jeff?
I'm so thrilled to chat with him. I know this is going to be a good conversation.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, how are you? What the frack is going on?
You like a good pun too.
Yes, this is going to be a fun conversation. But as you could tell, Jeff, we kind of started the conversation a little bit. So tell me your hot take on trends and technology as, it's coming fast and changing the industry.
Well, it is definitely coming fast and furious. I've seen tech move really fast before, but nothing like we've seen in the last couple of years. I mean, it's moving every month, maybe a year of progress, 5 years ago. So and as a founder, it's so easy to chase those shiny objects. And I think that's one of the things as a leader that we have to resist in order to really grow is avoid, put some blinders on and avoid chasing every shiny object out there. And I think that's exponentially harder now in the world of AI and as fast as tech is moving.
Can I ask you, because you're obviously very tech savvy, how do you sort through the noise, and what advice would you give founders that maybe aren't very savvy, tech savvy, to go, okay, this is what I know I need to look at or chase, and this is what I shouldn't?
I think one of the first things to do is take a step back and figure out what problem am I trying to solve, and figure out what is the best solution for that problem. What is my right next step? And then, are there tools? Is there AI? Is there knowledge I need to get? Is there something I need in order to take that next step? And sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes it's just moving. Occasionally there are tools or things like that, but it's really starting with the problem and what problem am I trying to solve first, not looking out there and seeing what the trends are, what the tech is, or what the latest and greatest is, and trying to figure out how to apply that to my business, but figure out what is my right next step. And then maybe look outside for tools or knowledge or whatever it might be.
It's funny because we've been having a lot of conversations and, with a lot of different experts. Every week we're on here with a different expert. And at the end of 2025, all of those conversations, no matter where the topic started, always kind of flowed back to like this authenticity, like bringing in the human aspect. In 2026 so far, and Tamara, you can correct me if you feel different, I feel like the conversation has come back to foundations and like strategy, right? In the sense that if you don't have the foundation set up in your company, you don't have, going back and checking through what are your processes, where can you implement AI, where can you implement tools, instead of going the opposite way of like, okay, let's just jump on this trend and see where we can fit it into our business plan. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. And it's really tough to do that as fast as tech is moving, because companies and especially founders, they don't want to miss out. The bigger companies, and I'm talking, big enterprises, Fortune 500, their boards are asking them, what are you doing with AI? Even, $100 million companies, funded companies, their investors, their boards are saying, what are you doing? What's your AI play? What's your strategy? And they don't want to not have an answer. And so I think that's driven some of the craziness over the last year, is just having to have some sort of an answer, even though it's not the right answer, just to have an answer to the board so they don't lose their job, or they're not looked at as, you're behind, you're not leading well. I think there's definitely a lot of pressure that way. But yes, taking a step back, foundation absolutely matters. And even in SaaS, we've seen a big shift from growth at all costs a few years ago to now, much more, capital efficient growth is the term. But it's really coming back to basics. And it's, what kind of a business are we going to build that is sustainable, that is what we call future proof, that you're going to build, and it's going to be something that's going to be here for the long term, not a flash in the pan. So it's kind of a shift between what used to be acquisition first thinking of we're just going to grow as fast as possible and then sell this thing, to really more fundamental. We're going to build something that's solid, and we're going to retain the customers that we sign. It's not just churn and burn. We want to retain that and expand. Expansion revenue is definitely highly valued today. So it's I think very healthy in order to take a step back. And Warren Buffett has a great phrase for that, and he says, when the tide goes out, you can see who's been swimming naked. And I think that has happened a lot. It's good fun. It happened a lot in business. Is companies were growing really fast, and there's a lot of things going on, a lot of activity, and then there's a little bit of a pullback in the economy, or sales slows, or they start losing a bunch of deals to no decision, and that revenue starts to fall, and then all the processes, all the things that they've been kind of neglecting, are right out there for everybody to see. And so, that back to basics mentality is really important, and making sure that we've got our own house in order so that we can weather those storms, because the trend is not always up and to the right.
Yeah. And it's funny because we're seeing, it's not just trends in technology, Tamara. I mean, I've been seeing trends in VC funding around this as well. And, just because I feel like a lot of startups, they're constantly trying to adjust to what VCs want versus just building a company that any VC would want, right? And I think those foundations definitely work into even those trends.
Yeah, we saw the shift happen a few years ago, where it went from VCs just handing out money and it was how fast can you do customer acquisition, to pre-seed is now how many customers do you have, and how do you plan to grow it? Versus a few years ago, pre-seed was, okay, use this to finish building your product, and then you start doing customer acquisition. So it really has shifted to that sustainable growth engine mentality from, I think, the VCs down, not vice versa, not businesses changing the VCs' minds. So, I mean, what I'm curious about, and this is a question I've been asking myself a ton, is how do you create that sustainable growth engine, especially when you have to be lean and mean those first few years?
I think one of the most important things is getting to market as quickly as possible. And you kind of hit on that. So it's not about finishing the product and then going to market, but really starting with that and building with a specific market in mind, not building a product and then taking it out to the market and trying to find that product market fit, like who wants this thing that we built, but taking a step back and finding out, what does the market want? What is a need that somebody is desperate to fill right now, that we can build technology to fill that? And I think today, product is not nearly the moat that it was even a couple of years ago. I think product is almost a commodity, and there'll be people that disagree with that, and that's fine. But writing code, that AI can do that pretty well now. So duplicating something, and there've been some pretty big companies out there, and a handful of people, even one person, will take a weekend, like, hey, I've just replicated this entire system in a weekend. So product is not the moat that it was, but that client acquisition, that's big. Community, that's huge. And so really figuring out, what are those moats? What is the market that we can actually go serve really, really well? And doing that before we even build a product. I mean, sell it before you buy it, or sell it before you build it.
Yeah.
And is this what the executive navigation system is? Like, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. That's actually a big part of it. And wrote about that quite a bit in my first book, Small Fish, Big Pond. And what it is, it's essentially a model of building a predictable revenue engine, a leadership team where the CEO is really leading, not doing. And so getting out of that doer role and figuring out, how do we build processes into the business? How do we really scale so that it scales beyond one person? And then being acquisition ready. So there are specific things, specific KPIs that investors are looking for. I mean, in our world, most of the companies are still looking for funding at some point. It could be early on, it could be down the road. But what are the things that we can do now to really build a company that's going to be attractive to an ideal buyer? And the cool thing about that is, it doesn't really matter if you sell or not. If you build that way to where you're going to be attractive, then you have a lot of options. It means that you can hold on to the business. It means you're profitable. It means that this is something that, if you decide you never want to sell, that you're really building an asset that has significant value, not just for the short term, but for the long term.
I think that's the goal of, every business, right? You want to be, whether you want to be sustainable for years and years and generational and handed down and whatnot, or you want to be bought out and moved on to the next venture. I think the biggest part that everyone has an issue with is going from that $1 million a year company to that $10 million a year company. And a lot of those CEOs or founders have trouble moving out of the position of doer into leader.
Yes.
So the book will be linked below. I know I'm going to be reading it, so maybe we'll start a book club.
It's funny. So my CTO just had a conversation. My co-founder and CTO just had a conversation with me as we're bringing more people on. She was like, you now need to step out of this role, because I was doing so much product. And she was like, now you step out of that, get your nose out of that. and we're using new systems for organizing our products or our workflow. And I was like, I'm not as familiar with that one. I'm more familiar with this other one. And they were like, your job, we present it to you, and your job is to sign off. You don't have to. And I was like, oh my gosh, right? Like, and we're starting it early, but I was just like, okay, yeah, I do. I have to start figuring out this different way of working with the team. We're no longer, we're still a lean startup, but we're no longer just the tiny shop we were. So it is interesting and hard. I've been preaching what Nicole says. You have to, set up your systems, and you have to learn how to move out of your own way. And then when you're in that place, all of a sudden it's hard to make that step. But you mentioned something earlier that I thought was really interesting, and it's about the shift in acquisition first to retention first marketing and objectives. Can you explain a little bit more of that, and why is that important?
I think that's really important because it's a business that is sustainable. Because if you're not paying attention, to retention, then you're filling a leaky bucket. So you could have the greatest sales effort happening on the front end, but then if they're churning out at 30, 90 days, a year, then it is very, very difficult to really hit scale. And we can actually do a simple calculation. I can tell you exactly where you're going to get stuck, if that's the case, because we can just look at the numbers, and I could say, here's going to be the ceiling, which is eye-opening for a lot of founders and sometimes a little bit depressing. But when we can fill that leaky bucket and keep the retention high, then it makes it a lot easier to scale. The other reason that that's become a lot more important is because sales, I think now is harder than it's maybe ever been, in that a lot of companies are delaying decisions. About 60% of deals that we're seeing are being lost to no decision. It's not that they're losing to competitors. It's they go through the sales process and they get to the end and they're like, well, we're going to just sit tight for now and maybe next quarter. And so we see a lot of that. And so that's one of the things that we've actually put into place is what do we do to change that trend? How do we get those sales moving? How do we really make the argument that now is the time to move? Really important. But if you're losing and filling that leaky bucket, and then that front end stops producing like it was, and you're putting less in, it becomes a whole lot more important to hold on to what you have.
Yeah. A really great example of this leaky bucket, like, we talk about funnels in marketing all the time, right? Like funnels, funnels, funnels. And I had a client, was an e-commerce client. They wanted more and more sales. And I literally had to draw it out on a whiteboard for them of like, okay, here's your funnel, like through the sale from acquisition all the way through, buying their first order. And then even, there's a second funnel for getting them back in, right, and buying a second order. And we did all the math, like sitting right there where I showed them the conversion rate from the top to the bottom and then at each section of the funnel. And I was like, I can get you the amount, because their idea was, we need more people through the top. We need lead generation.
Right.
How much money do we need to get to the goal we want? And so I literally sat there and did the math on a whiteboard with them and showed them, like, if you want to get the amount through in order for the conversion rate you have right now to get the amount of revenue you want, and we can't get enough people through the top of the funnel. And it's because you're missing at this one conversion rate.
Right.
And it was a really it would cost you X amount, millions of dollars to get to this spot. But if we spend, I don't know, a few $100s on one of our coders to fix this one leaky spot that people we're losing people through. Now, when we change that conversion rate at literally with what we're getting now in the top of funnel, you could hit half of what your goal is already, right? Like, you're never going to hit your goal by putting more in the top if you don't fix those middle pieces. And I think people are not standing back enough to do, like, even just spending once a quarter, once every half a year, once every year, pulling back and looking at the data that they're actually collecting, and just seeing where people sit. You'll start seeing these spots where you can kind of pull levers and start to kind of adjust without even adding more budget to your marketing plan, right?
Yes. And that's really interesting because it's probably 95% of the clients that we onboard. And in our initial conversations, what is the big challenge right now? It's we need more leads. Okay. Maybe. But then when we actually look at it, it's exactly what you said. It's not a top of funnel problem, at least not primarily. There are other places where they're losing. And we had one where onboarding. They were thinking that they had a lot of people that were signing up, but then they weren't sticking past the 14-day trial. And do we need to make it a 30-day trial? And a whole bunch of different things. We actually looked at the flow, and from the time you signed up, and it seemed like it made a lot of sense to them, there were about 9 steps that a person had to go through in order to actually get any significant value. And that would take several days. And most people just never got to that point. And so kind of taking a step back, like you said, and looking at it, say, okay, how can we get them value in the first 30 seconds? How about the first hour? What can we do and put in place that are going to get them activated and excited and get them really moving forward? And so it's just a few small changes. It didn't take major revisions. It was just kind of rethinking that flow, because they're looking at it as providers going, it's easy. We do this all the time. Where somebody coming in, they've never done it before. And to them, it's confusing. It's time confusing. They're like, I give up. And we can just solve that problem, solve the I give up problem, and make it to where, wow, this is cool. Now, we're making some significant progress. So it's a lot of times it's presented as top of funnel, but it very rarely is.
Yeah. The mom test, right? Like, can your mom get through the process, right? I always have my mom come and work through a website. Yeah. Oh, your mom's, anyone's mom, right? Like anyone, if they can get through the process and like see what their questions are, because generally that's going to be the questions of your people, right? Because you're too close to it. I love that, because onboarding, if I had one tip based on what you just said, is like not just look at the funnel, but like most places that I talk to, onboarding is one of the biggest challenges to stickiness. And
Yes.
what I always suggest a lot of times is like, even in the beginning, let's have someone do like a white glove. Like, yes, it's going to cost you to have someone on your team who is just like working through white glove onboarding with people. And that looks, as a line item in a spreadsheet, that looks like an expensive piece. But I was like, the amount of stickiness and the amount of feedback you're going to get just by having that one person is going to be worth it ROI wise in the future. And maybe we cut them out eventually, but getting people onboarded so that they're seeing results right away is like such a huge piece to the puzzle.
It is. It is. That's really what makes it sticky. And that can go anything from software to even like I signed up for a loyalty app to get points at a restaurant. Well, I would try to go to the site. Well, you can't do that. You have to download the app, which I don't really want, but okay. And then you sign up for the app, and then I've got to go to my email and get the code to validate the app. And then the receipt didn't scan. It's like, I just want to give up. I'm probably not coming back here again anyway. So how do you make it easy?
No, I'm curious because I know every business is different, but you're here and we want to get your insight. What are kind of the main tips or advice or trends that you're seeing that you're advising on in that getting people to be either more sticky or reducing the friction? What are you advising companies right now?
I think onboarding flow is a really big one. Retention, measuring usage, so average daily users versus monthly users. I think that can be a really interesting ratio to see of how many people are engaging, because what'll happen is you'll actually, before somebody churns, you'll see their usage go down. And we had this in my own SaaS company. We were enterprise, and had a churn problem a couple of years ago, and started looking at the data, and every single one, 3, 4, 5, 6 months before, we see usage start to go down. It's like, why were we not measuring this? Because we didn't have a churn problem. And I think that's what happens a lot is you wait until it becomes an issue before you address it. And when we can do that on the front end and address it and figure out what are those metrics, what are going to be the leading indicators? Because if it happens and we can see a downward trend for a couple of months, there's probably still a chance to save it. If they've already made, given us notice and saying, hey, we're leaving, and we can look back and there's a 6-month trend, they've probably already switched to something else. And so it's so important to catch that early and to really pay attention to it. So I think that's a big one. Other ones, just like we said in the beginning, really paying attention to what's most important in your business, and not getting distracted by the shiny objects or the tech, or I need to go do whatever somebody else is doing. Chasing competitors is another one. Not just shiny objects, but chasing competitors, chasing feature parity.
Yeah. I mean, Tamara, like this comes back to what we talk about with fractional executives all the time. And in the sense of like, there's executional marketers who are going to be able to put together your social media and like schedule it to go out. And they're going to be able to look at trends. And then there's strategical marketers, right? People who are really thinking about the strategy of what does marketing operations look like. And then you have CMO level who are really looking at not just the trends out there, but the trends that are happening in your data, and know how to read data and not just say, oh, our clicks are down, but seeing like, okay, not just our churn is up, but are people at day 4, they're starting to disengage at day 4 versus day 10, right? They used to disengage at day 10, right? And what does that mean? And I think that especially like even with the KPIs, right? We love to talk about KPIs. We love to talk about revenue numbers, but we should really also be a CMO level, an executive level person should be able to look at things like KPAs, right? What are those actions that are happening before the KPI even happens that
Yes.
they can see trends from. And those KPIs don't just like come out of nowhere. When we're building our yearly plan or our 3-year plan, those KPIs are already built in so that we know we're tracking them. We're not tracking them, oh shoot, there's an issue with churn. Now we need to track KPIs that we don't have historical data for, right? Like they're already putting those in place. And that strategic plan, what we put together is called a marketing success plan or a growth success plan, depending on what the scope looks like. That plan allows us to say, ooh, this is a shiny new object. Ooh, our competitors are doing the XYZ. Our customers are saying XYZ because they want this trend. Does that trend fit into what our 3-year goals are, 1-year goal is? Do we push this to the side, or do we take it on and say this will actually fit into what we're trying to do? That gives us the ability to say no to things, right? Because it doesn't fit, especially when we're talking to big executives or boards where they really want to see that shiny object. We can say, oh, no. You told us the priority was XYZ. This doesn't fit into the priority. Has the priorities changed in your mind? And that starts that conversation with them if you have these plans and this strategic viewpoint.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I think it's interesting because you mentioned new features and kind of taking what Nicole said. A lot of times when you're reading that data, you can think, oh, I need a new feature to solve this problem, right? And that most of the time is not the answer, because if you're seeing churn, you're seeing drop off, it's not because they're seeing a new feature somewhere else that they want. It's because they're not navigating your site properly. And so your offering is not as clear as it should be. So I think that's something that's really, important to not jump the gun on when you're looking at your data, is going right away to, oh, this is a new feature or a new offering problem.
Yeah, news not always better.
That's where we
Jeff,
go
what
as
I would
founders, though, is we think it's a product problem because
Yeah.
that's the fallback. That's what we're comfortable with. And so we think, well, it's got to be a feature problem. And so I can build something to fix that. That's how we think. That's why we start companies. And so it's a very natural thing, but you're exactly right. It's usually not the right answer, at least initially.
Yeah. I mean, I'm starting to get with a lot of these apps that I'm seeing, this is like feature overload.
Yes.
Right? Where you started with something because you really liked it, and then all of a sudden it's hard to navigate the app because there's so many features that you're like, well, wait, what was this meant for originally? How was this helping me originally? And now it's got all these things that I don't need and I like better somewhere else.
Yeah. I think that it's funny because I think that we give them more like benefit of the doubt that they can view themselves in a situation, right? So for instance, like project management software. This is one I go back to all the time because I've been through every single project management software out there with clients. And so often they get in there and they're like, oh, all these features are great, but they don't know how to implement it for their specific situation. And I always go back to the case study around Asana. I'm not a huge Asana fan. Like I think it's a one-person kind of project management tool. If that's what you like, that's great. If it fits you. But one thing that they have in their knowledge base that I thought was so great is they have a different piece of knowledge for every like industry or use case. So if I'm a real estate agent, it's like, here is how you could use Asana for real estate. And it shows them how to build the folders and the lists and the things that would work for real estate. And then you can go to, a hairdresser or a content creator, and it literally shows them how to use the same tools for any different industry. And I think that we're so close to a product, we're like, oh, I always hear it's going to sell itself. This product's going to sell itself. We don't need a marketing plan. We don't need marketing budget. It never happens that way. You need a marketing plan. You need to tell people how your piece of product actually can be used for their use case. And I think that that's something we overlook way too often.
That's so valuable to do that. And it takes a little bit of time, but even just starting with one industry and then expanding out from there, but connecting the dots. Otherwise you show up to project management software and you've got blank screen and you got all these tools and you're like, okay. It's like looking at Canvas. And here's here's paint, here's some brushes, go do your thing. And you're like, I don't even know what to do. But if you can give them a paint by number, they're like, oh, okay, I get this. I can match the number to the color and I can do this. And they make progress. They're like, wow, look what I built. And now they have that pride of ownership, which also affects how long they're going to keep the product.
Yeah. And once there's progress, once they see a little bit, then that's when things really open up, which is why the onboarding process is so important for adaptation.
It is.
So Jeff, I guess my question for you is, we like to leave people with actionable steps, right? Because at the end of the day, I've listened to way too many podcasts that are valuable, but I still don't know what to do when I leave. And so if I'm a business owner who's listening to this, or I'm an executive who's listening to this going, yes, this is exactly me. What are my few steps I can do right now that will help me either realize what my next steps are, or figure out what my challenges or holes in my leaky bucket are?
Absolutely. I think one of the first things is look at the KPIs that you're tracking and figure out, are they leading KPIs or are they lagging KPIs? The example would be revenue. And so, it could be monthly revenue, quarterly, ARR, whatever that might be. Revenue is a lagging indicator. It shows you what happened in the past. A better thing to track, especially early, is, what is my pipeline coverage? How is my pipeline growth? What is my sales cycle? Because you can see what that sales velocity is. Those are all forward looking. And what we can't change the past, those are things that we can affect for the future. I think that's a really big one, is look at the KPIs and figure out which ones that you're tracking are leading indicators that you can change, or lagging indicators that just look back at what has happened. A second one is what we call revenue retention momentum. And it's not just if customers stay, but if they grow. So let's say you have a company and they have 95% customer retention, but 120% revenue retention. So 95% stay, 5% go away, but 120% revenue retention. So you're getting expansion revenue inside those accounts. They're building a growth engine, even if they never add another customer. That's one of the reasons that retention is so important. And I think most founders get it backwards, is they pour so many resources into acquisition while their expansion revenue potential just kind of sits untapped. And if you look, cross sells, upsells, upgrades, what are you doing with your existing base? And your existing customer base isn't just a safety net; it's your most undervalued growth asset.
Yeah.
And I'll leave you with one more. And this is something that Tamara talked about, of decisions and letting things go. And that's so hard as a founder, is to delegate and let things go. And I'll tell you, I've never let anything go without leaving claw marks all over it. My team would tell you that. But here's something that really helped, is looking at data, and then there's intuition. And some people would say those are opponents, but I look at them more like dance partners, because data tells you what's happening, but intuition will often tell you why. And sometimes that comes from your client. Sometimes it comes from your team. Sometimes you know it as a founder or feel it as a founder. And so I think it's those two together. And I use what I call the 10-50 decision framework. So for decisions that are under 10K or they're easily reversible, I'll just go with gut, because if I'm wrong, I can change that. For decisions that are over 50K or hard to reverse, we have to have data. And it's that middle ground where magic happens, where data informs intuition. And so thinking about that as a framework of, is this a decision I can let go and let somebody else make because it's easily reversible, it's lower risk, versus this is something that I really need to have data, and this is a decision I need to hold on to. Because as founders, we hold on to a lot of those little decisions that we don't need to.
Yeah. Wow. I think those tips, 3 massive tips. I've never used the terminology you used for leading. What was it? Leading and lagging KPIs. But I love that, because I tend to tell sales teams and marketing teams, like, yes, revenue is a great number, but at the end of the day, once we're already looking at the revenue number, there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
It's already there. And what I'd rather look at is, if we know that we can sign 75, 80, 90% of all open opportunities, then why wouldn't we be looking at, okay, let's increase our open opportunities, right? Because then we can kind of start seeing how that's going to inform, revenue, right? That's an example of it. But I love that. I'm going to steal those leading and lagging KPIs there. And then, the second one of just, sorry, I just blanked for a second. No, all three of those are so freaking important. Go back, listen to them, because apparently I blanked, so I'm gonna have to go back and write notes. But all of those are so important, and they're things people can do right now that don't cost them any money. It costs them some time. It costs them some, looking at the data. We implement the 24-hour rule with big decisions so that we have time to look at the data, right? No one's allowed to make a decision off of just instinct. But with that being said, Jeff, I feel like we can go through millions and millions more questions. But how can someone, if they are listening to this, they want to work with you, they want to read your books, they want to get to know who Jeff really is, how can they find you?
You can find me on every social platform. It's at Jeff K. Mains, middle initial K, Jeff K. Mains, or go to our website, championleadership.com. Lots of resources there for you, and it links out to everything else that you want.
Well, we're going to be joining your crew. See what I did there?
I love it.
And we're going to be following along. But if you guys have not joined our community, every week we're here with another expert trying to inform you on and teach you how to think more strategically about growth, not just following the trends. But we do have some good trends and topics too, Tamara. So make sure to follow us on YouTube, join our newsletter, because that is where you're going to find all the newest information, including where we'll be speaking live at Tech Weeks around the country and the world this year. And join us on all social medias. But with that being said, they can join us every week here. So we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jeff.